Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia series. While we won't be going deep into each of these 7 separate books, I will be discussing each one and giving an overview of the plot for each. The theme I wanted to glean from these books is the idea of writing allegories. I believe that allegories is a lost art in so many different ways. Too often the idea of them that they are purely theological. And while the majority of them are religious, there are so many other ways we can use these ideas to help us write our own stories. Of course, it would help to understand what an allegory actually is. So I pulled the definition from Merriam-Webster. Allegory: the expression by means of symbolic fictional figures and actions of truths or generalizations about human existence. A writer known for his use of allegory. Or, also, an instance, as in a story or painting, of such expression. The poem is an allegory of love and jealousy. Here we see that if we harness the idea of allegories, we can have a lasting impact on our readers. So often when we read stories, particularly older ones, there are elements of allegories that are hidden just below the surface, and we only need to dig deeper. But before we get into the works themselves, I want to touch on the man who is probably the most well known for using allegories, C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, named Clive Staples Lewis, born November 29th, 1898, and died November 22nd, 1963, was a British writer, literary scholar, and Anglican lay theologian. He held academic positions in English literature in both Magdalene College, Oxford, and Magdalene College, Cambridge. He is best well known as the author of the Chronicles of Narnia. He is also noted for his other works of fiction, such as the Screwtape Letters, the Space Trilogy, and for his non-fiction Christian apologetics, including Mere Christianity, Miracles, and The Problem with Pain. At some point, I will be going over the Screwtape Letters, because for me, has been one of the greatest descriptions of evil written down. In addition to his literary works, should also note that he is a veteran of World War I, as well as close friends with the author J.R.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings. There are very few authors who are known not only for their fictional work, but also their non-fictional work. I would even go so far as to say that his catalog of non-fiction work outweighs his fictional. His personal journey away from Christianity, and then back to, was painstakingly chronicled in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy. Another book we might take a look at is a book called A Grief Observed, which he wrote after the death of his wife, Joy Davidman, detailing the grief he struggled with. Lewis passed on November 22nd, but didn't get much media coverage as this happened to be the same day that JFK was also assassinated. Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, also passed away on the same day. Now that we have an outline of Lewis's life, let's get into the text. As always, I will be skipping a lot of information, so I encourage everyone to check out his works for yourself. I will link resources in the description below. Chronicles of Narnia. There are 2 starting points for the 7-book series. First will be date of publication, which has The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as its first book in the series. But if we want to follow the in-world timeline, we need to start with the 6th book, The Magician's Nephew. Another timeline note would be the 5th book. The Horse and His Boy would end up being book number 3, as it takes place within the time frame of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. For the sake of the video, I will be following the in-universe timeline to help keep the overall Narnian story straight. In addition to the books, audiobooks, both regular and dramatized, movies have been adapted for a number of the books. The one I personally grew up was the animated version from 1979. The more popular Disney version wasn't released until I was 17. So let's get started with an overview of each book. The Magician's Nephew. The story begins in London around 1900, when 2 children, Diggory Kirke and Polly Plummer, meet. One day they go exploring in the attic passage along the terrace houses. They intend to go into an unoccupied house, but end up going into Diggory's house instead, surprising Diggory's uncle Andrew in his study. Uncle Andrew manages to trick Polly into touching a magic yellow ring, which causes her to disappear. Andrew then blackmails Diggory into following to rescue her by using another yellow magic ring, and gives him 2 green magic rings to bring them back. Diggory puts on the yellow ring and vanishes as well. But where will he appear again? What has happened to Polly? While the other books follow the adventures of the Pevensey children, or Pevensey adjacent, this story follows the boy that would end up being the professor in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, something you don't find out until the end of the book. The exception to this is the story The Horse and His Boy, which the main character is someone born entirely in the story world. The next book we'll be taking a look at is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Narnia, a land frozen in eternal winter, a country waiting to be set free. 4 adventurers step through the wardrobe door, and into the land of Narnia, a land enslaved by the power of the White Witch. But when almost all hope is lost, the return of the great lion, Aslan, signals a great change and a great sacrifice. This book will be the one that most people are familiar with, as a number of versions of this story have been made by a number of different companies. The most popular would be Disney's live-action version, which stayed reasonably close to the source material. The allegory of the cost of sin and sacrifice for that sin is blatant, with no hint of subtlety, with regards to Jesus as Aslan. Something is rumored that prompted J.R.R. Tolkien to write Lord of the Rings, to show Lewis how to be more subtle. I haven't found any evidence of this though the allegories became less blatant in the following stories. The Horse and His Boy, Narnia, where some horses talk, where treachery is brewing, where destiny awaits. On a desperate journey, two runaways meet and join forces. Though they are only looking to escape their harsh and narrow lives, they soon find themselves at the center of a terrible battle. It is the battle that will decide their fate and the fate of Narnia itself. This story is different from all the others because this is the only book where none of the children from the Pevensey world are the focus of the story. The main character is a young boy named Shasta, who runs away from his adoptive and abusive father with the help of a Narnian talking horse called Bree. They end up, by the actions of a lion, with another pair of runaways, named Avis Tarkina, and her own Narnian talking horse named Hwin. Like I had mentioned earlier, this is my favorite of all the seven, Prince Caspian. Narnia, the land between the lamppost and the castle Cair Paravel, where animals talk, where magical things happen, and where adventure begins. Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy are returning to boarding school when they are summoned from a jury train station by Susan's own magic horn to return to the land of Narnia, the land where they had ruled as kings and queens, where their help is desperately needed. In this story, we return to Narnia sometime after the Pevensies had left at the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Here, we see the children relearn what they need to do to save Narnia from the Telmarines. In the movie, there are a number of areas where there's a deviation from the source material, and while I'm not a fan of these deviations, it makes sense within the story that Lewis is trying to convey, namely, the idea of what the will of Aslan is and how the children need to give up their own desires to follow it, and allow Aslan to win the battle. Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Narnia, where anything can happen, and most often does, and where the adventure begins. The Dawn Treader is the first ship Narnia has seen in centuries. King Caspian has built it for his first voyage to find the Seven Lords, good men whom his evil uncle banished when he usurped the throne. This journey takes Edmund, Lucy, and their cousin, Eustace, and Caspian to the eastern islands, beyond the Silver Sea, toward Aslan's country at the end of the world. In the case of Dawn Treader, we have a couple changes to the story pattern. First, like the Horse and His Boy, it doesn't take place in Narnia at all, but rather it is a journey that takes place in a ship. The second is how much time has taken place between when the Pevensies left and returned. In the time between The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, this correlated to nearly 1,300 years in Narnia. But while it has also been a year for the Pevensies, it has only been 3 years for Narnia. We see this odd timeline in the next book, where only a few months has passed when Eustace returned to Narnia, and how much time has passed then. But within the story itself, the sense of exploration is the primary goal for the whole of the story, and each island helped the characters learn different lessons. The Silver Chair, Narnia, where giants wreak havoc, where evil weaves a spell, where enchantment rules. Through dangers untold and caverns deep and dark, a noble band of friends are sent to rescue a prince held captive. But their mission to the Underland brings them face to face with an evil more beautiful and more deadly than they have ever expected. The primary allegory here is the sovereignty of God and how his will played through while we are failing to do his will. This story has one of my favorite characters in the series. His name is Puddleglum, and what's an interesting distinction between Lewis and Tolkien is when it comes to character creation. Tolkien is a purist, that the characters he creates have a real-world example in mythology, whereas Lewis is a lot more chaotic and willing to create the oddest of beings to fit his world. The Last Battle, Narnia, where lies breed fear, where loyalty is tested, where all hope seems lost. During the last days of Narnia, the land faces its fiercest challenge. Not an invader from without, but an enemy from within. Lies and treachery have taken root, and only the king and a small band of loyal followers can prevent the destruction of all they hold dear in this, the magnificent ending of the Chronicles of Narnia. This is the last book of the series, and has the primary allegory of retelling the book of Revelation, or the biblical end times. Here it's a discussion of not only the end of the world, but also how authoritarian people are able to use the ignorance and fear of others to gather power, and how others are willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get that power. While it is a sad story as it is the last, it is a fitting end to the whole series, and it has some of my favorite quotes of this series. I just want to take the moment and share them with you. And then she understood the devilish cunning of the enemy's plan. By mixing a little truth in it, they had made their lie far stronger. In a world where lies are more plentiful than truth, we can often spot the lies, but mix a little bit of truth in it, and the lie will quickly take hold, making it almost impossible to remove. I have been wondering where to find him, and my happiness is so great, it even weakens me like a wound. And this is the marvel of marvels, that he called me beloved, me who am but as a dog. As a Christian, this quote hits hard, as it is an expression of my own heart, not of one escaping punishment, but gratitude for the love of the one who loved me before I even knew I was lost. As he spoke, he no longer looked at them like a lion, but the things that began to happen after that were so great and so beautiful I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all the stories. And we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All of their life in this world, and all their adventures in Narnia, had only been the cover and the title page. Now, at last, they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. This is a tough quote to read, as it fills my heart with joy and expectation. These are the last lines of the series, and I cannot think of a more beautiful ending. Overall, the depth of the allegory depends on the depth of the truth behind it. While the depth of Lewis's understanding of biblical truth is evident, we must be sure we approach the allegories in our own stories in the same way, or we will fall short of what we're trying to achieve. Allegory requires that we have an understanding of truth, but also of reality. Any allegory will fall flat if we try to impose our own version of reality onto a story, for it is a descriptive element, not a prescriptive. While there are times and places for prescriptive narratives, we will find it hard to connect with our readers, particularly if we try to be 100% prescriptive. First, we must describe our world to our reader to ensure that we share a vision of this reality. This is before we talk about how things could be better. Even then, prescriptive writing should be done with the greatest of care. On Thursday, we will be taking a look at other ways to incorporate allegory into our stories. So come back and we will take a look at other ways to apply allegories. As always, I will be linking the resources I use in the description below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know in the comments below. Until next time.
I am a poor, wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe, yet there's no sickness, toil, nor danger in that bright land to which I go.